It's not too dissimilar, really. I mean, we've got quite used to working on the band as a complete, like, separate entity whilst we do full-time jobs as well. So it's kind of, just sort of, fitting everything in. It's a little bit tricky, but we kind of make it work. And the more the campaign's going along, the more excited we are about the next bit. I mean, we've been together, for me and Dottie, for about 5 years, and only now have we released our first record. So it's kind of, it's exciting.
So if anything, the month from now, like, that's going to be the anomaly.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. I mean, when it gets to touring and when the album's actually out, I mean, it's a big thing. We're still kind of in the announcement window, so all the stuff that we've been getting in is sort of preparing for April and beyond. But it's possibly calm before the storm at the moment. But it's all very exciting.
What is your full-time gig?
I work in music, actually. So I've worked in the music industry for about 10 years. I've worked at some big labels, and currently I'm working for Warchild as part of their music team. So that's, it's a really, really good gig to get, and lovely people, and it's a lovely side to the business. So I'm having a good time there. That's
always a something I'm curious about, is how much you want to enter an industry that you ultimately want to be in. I mean, it sounds like you've got, like, at the end of the day, it sounds like you've gotten to see, like, a pretty good side of it. But I guess you don't always want to see how the sausage is made. As they say.
I know what you mean. I mean, I'm slightly lucky in the sense that my background is in catalog recordings. So essentially working on and marketing, predominantly product, actually not marketing, but I've done a lot of that. Older releases, heritage artists, bands and artists that have been through that whole thing. So I'm not really seeing, like, the new acts. I've never really worked a frontline sort of new release, which I suppose gives what I'm doing with Deary a little bit of space to breathe. And most of the artists that I've worked on, from anywhere from, like, the 70s up to the 2010s. So it's been quite interesting to, see what the industry was like at that particular time. Like, one of my favorite ones that I worked on was a reissue of the album Sulk by the Associates, which was like weird. I was working on it, and I knew the record, but I didn't know it, like, inside and out. And then I worked on it, and just blew my mind how amazing that record was. And I think that kind of, not influenced in a way, but it was just like this is, a band that had no rules. They were weird and crazy in their own right, and they made this really haunting yet sort of vibrant, beautiful record. And there's been a couple of touchstones in my career that's made me kind of, want to pursue that myself. So it's a good gig. But as you said, I do see a lot of sausages getting made, which is not a good thing.
What specifically was it about? I mean, other than the final product, obviously, what was it about that specific record, and what was it that you found diving into it that you connected with?
I think it was the expression of it all more so than anything else. I mean, the production, I think it was John Leckie who produced it, or was it Mike Hedges? I can't remember which one, but very famous producer produced it. You had Alan Rankin and Billy Mackenzie, who made the record. And I think I was working with a chap called Michael Dempsey, who looks after the Associates estate, but also was the original bassist in The Cure, I think. And just hearing his stories of how that period of time was, and the kind of things that Billy asked the producer to do in the studio, not conducive to, like, someone who actually knows about music production. He was just like, make it sound more like Egypt, that kind of stuff. And the producer, okay, shit. And so
just like spouting out abstractions.
absolutely. I mean, they recorded this from memory. They recorded this mostly, you know, between the hours of 11 p.m. and 8 a.m. So they were, you know, they were in a very interesting creative space. And I think that the fact that they had all this, you know, major label money behind them and they went, fuck it, we're just going to make whatever we want to make, I think that kind of expression of it was something that drew me to that particular record. And, you know, I love records that there's a pop sensibility in the middle of it, but there's loads of noise around it. So if you listen to that Associates record, there's their big hit Party Fears 2 is, you know, big top of the pops hit, and it was brilliant. But there's some other really, really weird, amazing stuff that at the core of it is a pop song. It's a beautiful crafted pop song, but it's just doused in reverb and melancholy and all that kind of stuff. And it's just beautiful. It's really, really rich as a record.
That's interesting. I mean, do you feel that it starts, and I'm kind of curious if your own work kind of is built up in a similar way where it starts with kind of the bare bones of a very basic pop song and then you just layer on from there?
I think so. I mean, we never really write together in a studio, or in a rehearsal room rather. The ideas and the demos that I'll sit here, literally here doing, you know, in my spare time, would usually take the form of a pop song. You know, simple structure, no crazy time signature, all that kind of stuff, because it is literally just me working out ideas of what a verse or what a chorus could be. And then by the time I bring it to the guys, usually over WhatsApp, we're all very close, but geographically, Dottie's in Brighton, which is about an hour train from here. Harry's in East London, which is again about an hour train from here. So it's much easier for us to just voice what we're thinking and leave little voice notes and stuff. And then eventually when we get into a studio together, that's when structures start getting shifted and what we thought was a chorus is actually just a verse and things like that. So, yeah, it's not in real time that we sort of make all this stuff, you know.
And to a certain extent, you know, I have to assume that the way you work now is ultimately just a product of the way the band developed in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely space for us to get into a studio and jam and sort of see what comes out there. But I don't know. I feel like that's kind of an experiment that we haven't looked at yet, because we know the method that we have, and that kind of, it seems to work for us anyway. So, yeah. And I also much prefer bringing stuff to the table. Like I'm not a very good guitarist by any stretch of the imagination. You know, everybody else has their own sort of talents, but I think that if I can bring something to the room that's fairly fleshed out, then it'll make everyone's life a little bit easier at the end. But you know, the stuff that we did on Birding, it was a lot earlier on in the process that we actually started bringing it into the studio. We just wanted to get started on it. So the tracks that are on the record, a lot of them were, you know, here's 30 seconds of one idea that's it's like kind of spliced into another one. But, you know, we'll probably jam in the future, but right now, the method kind of works.
Like, I would consider myself a introvert as well, in spite of like doing things like this for a living, in spite of talking to strangers. And obviously like one-on-one is different, but also in terms of actually working out very personal things, you know, it is something that I assume is a little bit easier to do from the comfort of your living room.
Definitely. I feel a lot more comfortable going, you know, forming some sort of idea, having it fairly fleshed out in terms of, you know, not leaving too much to the imagination of somebody else and going, this is the kind of reverb that I want my guitar, this is the kind of drum tone that I'm after, or the drum sample or whatever. And similarly, you know, the lyric side of things, or even just the feeling of a track, you do want to be like, you know, this is what I was feeling right then, and you can hear it in the song, and that's what I'm going to take to people, as opposed to, you know, sitting down with Harry and Dottie and going, I feel a little bit sad at the moment, should we write a song? Do you know what I mean? It was more like, here's something that I did when I was in that particular headspace or whatever. Yeah,
I do appreciate, you know, and this is just sort of a sense that I get from, you know, having heard you, or I guess having read you sort of describe it, and you know, you have this very you know, you've come up with a very cute way of describing it, the whole Deary Dreary thing, but like, I don't know. It sounds like you were exercising some stuff on this record. Is that fair to say?
definitely. I think we were all exercising some stuff on the record. Me personally, you know, I made a few life decisions that were a little bit sort of disruptive. Like, I quit my job, I moved away from the place that I'd lived for like 10 years, and I essentially kind of started again in a different area of the city, and didn't have enough money to see my friends at the weekend. And when I was working during the week, it was, you know, if I wasn't working one day because I was writing some music for Deary, it means that I wasn't getting paid, like the life of a freelancer. So it was, I was in a really sort of weirdly dark period, and some other personal things that were going on. And through that came a lot of what the record kind of eventually turned into. And similarly with Dottie, the story we always say is, we were recording a single that we put out last year, and we were having a coffee on top of this studio in South London. That's this beautiful view of London, and we were just sitting there. It was a boiling hot day, and Dottie was like, I think I know what the track that was going to be Smile. She was like, I think I know what that track is going to be about. And I was like, what? And she said, did you see that they've declared a national emergency for, or a national crisis of violence against women in the UK? And I was like, no, I haven't seen that. And she was like, yeah, it's like, it's not just a thing that happens to every girl that we know or every woman that we know. It's like an actual crisis, like it's a fucking emergency. And she was like, that's just ridiculous. And I think that in those sort of moments, like me going through my personal thing and Dottie sort of finding her own little, her own voice in quite horrible circumstances, it's like, yeah, we did actually have something to say on the record, not, you know, massively projecting, but like to public, but also just to ourselves to kind of tackle these kind of subjects or use it to inspire us in some way.
Yeah, it's interesting though. I don't want to say it's funny, or you know, maybe a little ironic though, to say like, oh yeah, our relatively upbeat record is a product of a global pandemic.
Yeah. Are you talking about the first EP?
Yeah, that you know, we were in a little bit more of a positive mindset, and that came up from us having to be locked down because all these people were dying.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. It's weird. Like, the reason that I started writing these songs, and this is about a year before Dottie joined, was because I needed some sort of, you know, some sort of goal or some sort of catharsis or something to be like, you know what, I can't just be inside all day. And my partner, and we're still together, my partner and I sort of was working and living in the same room during lockdown. So she did a very good job in putting her headphones on and not listening to me just sort of jam away at all this stuff. And through, I don't know why, but and through that, you know, the first EP is actually quite, as you said, uplifting. It's quite sort of melancholy, but it's very sort of, I don't know, it's just very ethereal and lovely. Whereas I feel like we've kind of, yeah, I don't know. It was a strange time to get through, but that's, you know, the first EP and the first Deary stuff. That's what kind of came out of it.
You know, obviously there are we all, not only do we all cope with things in different ways, but even like within us ourselves, we have different ways of coping with things, you know, and that that almost sounds like you know, in much the same way that she was putting her headphones on, like I don't know, writing positive songs or writing uplifting songs is like that is also a way of dealing with something that is like incredibly sort of depressing. Like, you know, it is a form of, I suppose, escapism.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what Deary is and has been this whole time, is a way for predominantly us to escape in some fashion. And I mean, you know, it happened on the new record as well. A fairly bad time that people were going through for whatever reason, and the main thing that links us all together is our sort of shared experience of making this music. And for me personally, it's the best sort of therapy that I've got, is to sit down and write and just keep writing and writing and writing, you know. Yeah. rather than speaking, you know.
Listen, like I was in New York City. I was in Queens for like the better part of 20 years, and then recently moved. I'm about 2 hours north now, so I'm like living like in like the woods. It's very nice up here, but yeah, it's great and largely a positive life experience. It's life change, but you know, pretty dramatic one.
It takes time as well,
you know,
to kind of get used
to. Yeah. And you know, and I was but I was ready for it, right? I mean, and ultimately, in just about every way, I would say that it was the right decision. You know, it sounds like it was a little bit more difficult for you, right? That I mean, ultimately though, looking back on it, do you feel like you made the right decision?
Yeah, definitely. I think I'd got a little bit too stuck in the area of town that I was living in, but also the, you know, the want to keep sort of Deary going the way that it had been going, and not just Deary, but you know, music in general. Like I'm you know, I'm a little bit older than what I thought I should be, like releasing our first record. You know, this is kind of, sometimes I feel like it's a bit of a young person's game to make this kind of, try and make the industry work for them. And for me, you know, it happened maybe a couple of years too late, sort of thing. So when I did move, it was like, okay, you know, I'm moving my life because I want it a little bit quieter, and me and my partner want it a little bit quieter. And at the same time, you know, getting pulled back into trying to navigate making music for a living. So it's kind of, I don't know, it's a weird juxtaposition, but in hindsight, you know, it's all anxiety, it's all insecurity. It's not actually based in real life. The real life experience is, you know, you take a breath and you're all right. And it's actually quite nice around here, basically.
Sure. And there are, I mean, you know, I don't know how old you are, but you're not old. No. And there are benefits to having life experiences prior to that. There are benefits to having had, you know, to having to a certain extent navigated the music industry, and to having your life together, you know, prior to doing all of that, right? I mean, because that is, I think, going into that immediately before you've figured your stuff out, before your brain is fully formed, like that is what really ultimately messes people up.
No, definitely. And I am constantly reminded by people, and it's not like we're fucking living off the band or, you know, making great strides and whatever else, but, you know, we have been given a lot of amazing opportunities, and we've also stood up to those opportunities, which is something we forget a lot of the time. And, you know, it's not a testament to how, you know, close we are as a group, but it's good. Like there's no problem in there's no problems in kind of, you know, having done a lot of stuff already and having not like put a record out by now, you know, that kind of thing. It's like there's no issues, there's no rush, there's no pressure. It's just do it when it feels right. And I do feel like it feels right at the moment. And your life can also live around, you know, the music side of things. And that's something that I struggled with for a long time, was like you've got to keep on, pressing on and doing it even when you're knackered, and actually it's like you should do those things, but it doesn't necessarily have to mean it's one or the other. And I think Dottie and Harry share my view in that everyone's kind of very happy with how the band's shaping up, and how the record's shaping up as well.
It's really funny. I mean, this is all sort of starting to click together for me now that I'm speaking with you, but I attempted to sort of, look into, your background a little bit, and I looked at your Discogs, and I thought that it was a mistake, right? I thought, surely he has a common name. And then I realized, like, I think maybe I'm realizing, maybe it's because you worked on back catalogs. That is that why, like, you're suddenly, like, your Discogs, like, jumps from like Jack Nietzsche, like 1977 to like
Probably, yeah. So it's different credits and stuff, but
yeah.
The Deary stuff started on Discogs. I think it's like 2023. I think maybe put Fairground out or something. But then previous to that, it's I mean, I've got a credit on a reissue of Quiet Life by Japan, which was an album that came out in 1983, and I've got a credit on it. It's like no, I was just an assistant that's got a little wording in a reissue we did. So yeah, I didn't actually produce that record.
Yeah, you would have been. Yeah, I don't even know if you would have been alive at the moment that record came out. Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, but prior to the Deary stuff, I mean, were you playing around in bands?
Yeah, I mean, I've been making music since I was like 12. It's kind of a lifeblood. Like, I've always done it through school and through uni, and my whole career has basically been doing music in one guise or another. Predominantly sort of, alternative, one could call it sort of, blokes making indie music. Basically, that's kind of the way that I view it in my head now. And it was really, really good fun, and really cut my teeth on playing shows and recording and everything. And that's kind of where my love of producing came in. I feel much more like comfortable behind the desk than like playing in front of a crowd. But Deary's kind of shaken that all up and made it very much a level playing field for everything. And yeah, there's a couple of times, that I sometimes reminisce about the time that I was in those bands, and maybe should have done things a different way. Maybe I shouldn't have put as much pressure on it. Because I mean, none of the guys that were in those bands are doing music anymore, apart from one. And they're all kind of, settling down and whatever else, and I'm still cracking on.
What do you attribute that to? Is it just that ultimately it ends up being more of a hobby for people?
Yeah, there was a period. The reason why Deary started was because lockdown happened, and the band that I was in, we just played a gig and it was fucking terrible, and then lockdown kicked, and I was just like, actually, I don't think we were really sort of direction. We didn't really have a direction. We were struggling with, commitment. There was 5 of us in this band, and we were struggling with commitment, and we were struggling with ideas and who wanted to be the principal songwriter, and just, we're all very, very good mates, but just didn't quite click. And so I just sort of utilized that opportunity to make music on my own. And I think
the pandemic kind of put it out of its misery.
A little bit. And to be fair, it wasn't like I was hell bent on starting something away from the guys. It just sort of naturally happened. And I think I just wanted to experiment, especially, with my love of the dream pop shoegaze stuff. It was like I wanted to make some music that was like that, especially with like this sort of ethereal female vocal on it. And I think once me and Dottie found each other through a mutual friend and started working together, it was like, oh shit, this is actually really exciting. It's not just a little hobby. And then I think when we got picked up by Sonic Cathedral pretty early, it was like, oh shit, let's have a go at this. So it's been quite a natural progression over the last 5 years to the point where it is now, which is like, a priority. It's a really important thing for all of us. And the opportunities that are coming our way in terms of touring and studio time and all the the network that we've built. It's great. It's really fulfilling. And if people listen to it as well and like it, then that's a bonus.
It sounds like, at least though, in the back of your head, you had some sort of idea or notion, or at least like abstract sense of like what a milestone would look like, as far as a sense of like, okay, now you're putting out this record and now you feel like, oh, maybe that this is something you could have or should have hit a little bit earlier in life.
Yeah, I mean, it's bollocks, really. Like, even though I think it,
Okay.
it
It's just kind of like niggling in the back of your head somewhere.
It's, as I always like to put it, it's the imp of the perverse is what it's called. So it's basically that little thing in the back of your mind going, it's pat on the back for you, but also, don't you think you should have done this a little differently, or a little, I wouldn't say this. I'd say that Birding is done very well, but like the previous EPs that we've put out, there's a couple of mixes that I would change. There's a couple of vocal takes or guitar sound. You're never going to be happy with what you put out. And I'm a big Scott Walker fan, and I always resonate with the things that he says about him listening to his stuff from the 60s, which was like, he hasn't listened to those records in 30 years. Those kind of things. And I feel like that's a really, really important way of looking at it, which is something that in previous bands and previous projects that I've been like, no, we should take that down, take that out of the ether, remix it and put it back up. And it, those kind of, it got the better of me before, but with Deary, it's kind of, always looking forward, which is good.
Scott Walker, that's an interesting one. And he's definitely one who, I think, like a lot of kind of people of his ilk, got more of a do over there than he did over here. Especially with sort of the solo stuff. Obviously, the Walker brothers, and then kind of like really like super interesting, but far out there solo stuff that he did a little bit later in life. But what did he? I don't know specifically what he said about his earlier stuff, but what was that kind of remove or that distance that he had from it?
I mean, there was something a couple of years ago that happened. I mean, it might have been longer than that. It might have been like 10 years ago that there was a BBC Six Music did a special prom at the Royal Albert Hall, which was all of Scott Walker's music between his solo records between 67 and 70 or something, 64 and 70. So it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, and his fifth record that I can't remember what the title is, Till the Band Comes In or something. And it was Jarvis Cocker and Richard Hawley and Suzanne Somfort and John Grant, who sort of sung these songs accompanied with an orchestra. And it was around that time that I remember hearing him on the radio and him talking about, this is probably the first time that I'm going to listen to these songs in 30 years because I just don't want to listen to it because it either doesn't represent what he is now or he just never liked the mix or anything.
So he was saying that he wasn't even saying that about Walker Brothers. He was saying that about his solo stuff. He's saying that about
solo stuff. Yeah. And you would have thought that there's a couple of Walker Brothers songs that are stinkers, and you would have thought, maybe it's a bit twee for him, but no, it was it was Seventh Seal and Scott 4 and Old Man's Back Again that he was like, I don't really want to listen to it, and you're like, what? That's crazy, But that's the way that some musicians are, and it's definitely the way that I am as well. Is if I had to remix everything, I probably would, because that's just who I am. But can't do it.
That's the producer in you, and it's funny because one of the pieces that I did stumble on when I was sort of like kind of trying to dig in a little bit is there's a Q&A where you're talking about production, and I think one of your answers there is like, I guess like the dirty secret of production is it's all about levels, right? It's all about the mix, like 100%, and that ultimately sounds like what you're kind of getting at here is maybe the mix is a little bit off. You'd go in and just sort of tweak things around a little bit.
Absolutely. I mean, it can be as easy as that, or it can be, maybe that guitar doesn't sound right. There's a hiss on it or anything like that. But I've learned to love all those imperfections. Our producer Iggy, who initially came on as sort of like going to produce us, and then over the years we've started co-producing, and we're all kind of in it together, us four. He's been a really, really amazing inspiration and mentor in that respect of like, I'll be a little bit frazzled or a little bit stressed, and he'll go, "It's cool, man. Sounds great." I'm like, "Oh, there's a bit of hiss." And he's like, "Doesn't matter. It's cool."
It's shoegaze, right? It's supposed to be noisy.
Yeah, no, I think
it's
a slightly different hiss. But yeah, your point is very, very well made. It's kind of like, you know what?
Yeah, that's funny though. I mean, it's interesting. Like as a producer and as somebody who like as this band coming out, really as sort of a one and then a two-person project. Why did you bring somebody from the outside to produce?
Again, I think it was an anxiety and an insecurity thing. I think we did the first record ourselves, the first EP ourselves, with a friend, my friend Dom, who is, an amazing up and coming producer, real wizard. He's called Dom Freeman. And he helped us in the studio and all that kind of stuff. But I was like, I really want to mix it myself. And, it was a really good exercise to do that, to just try it, see what happens. I think the second EP, we wanted to polish things off a little bit, which is eventually what we did. But we knew that there was a middle ground between, complete creative control and that sort of polished professional sound, I suppose. Because, we're not really a bedroom kind of band. We do like, making sure that everything is, correct and sits together nicely and has the right, effects on it and the right techniques and the right microphones and stuff. So there was a middle ground to find, and that's where we came up with the idea of being a sort of 4-piece production team as opposed to just me or just Iggy or whatever.
The band has not. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit of myself back at me. The band hasn't been around very long, and it sounds like you started taking this really seriously almost immediately.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think again it comes back to the to the age thing. But the first time I picked up I wrote the first Deary tune, which was a horrible demo that will never see the light of day. But I wrote that in 2019, and I was 25, and I was like, had it in the back of my head that was like, by the time I'm 30, I either want to have something going on or just kill it stone dead. And I think that I was serious about it, and then Dottie came in, and I was more serious about it. And then as soon as Sonic came on board, it was like, okay, we've actually got a really important opportunity to get our music out to people and experience all these things that, not just me, but Dottie as well, been doing music for years and was sort of limited to playing in pubs in front of no one and whatever else. It was kind of like, we've actually got this opportunity to do it. And when Simon and Bella came on board, that was a real shot in the arm to be like, yeah, this is serious. So it's serious, but it's also fun as well.
When you say kill it dead, do you mean Deary, or you mean just this sort of like idea of being in bands?
Me being in a band, music, I've paid my dues. I've lugged gear every which way. Getting fucking booed, all that shit, man. Like one of the stories that I have that is, it's a tiny, tiny little thing, but me and my old band, we supported a band at the Shacklewell Arms in East London in 2017 called The Fontaines, and they later became Fontaines DC. And we supported them and played a gig to absolutely no one in the room. and they played their gig to about, half room full. And chatting with them afterwards, really, really lovely guys. Like Grian came up to the lead singer of the band, and he was like, "Your lyrics are great, man." And it was lovely. It was really, really nice. Had a couple of drinks with them or whatever, and then they were like, "Guys, we want to go out. Like, do you want to come?" And we just sort of went, "Nah, you're all right, mate. Like, we're going to go home." And then their Fontaine's DC. And my point with that is that like that was one of many, many, many bands that you saw playing the same kind of level at a certain point, and then they've gone there, and you're still doing that thing, doing shitty gigs, and it takes its toll on you. So I think I always had it in my head that it was like, when I'm 30, either something's happening that is an outlet for me personally, but also there's that kind of, I hate to say like external validation, but you want to know that there's like, there's a call and response thing going on. So you're not just screaming into the ether. But luckily, Deary has been a really important part of me continuing to do it. And I know that Dottie shares in the same thing. I mean, Harry's considerably younger than me, and well, not Dots, but considerably younger than me. He's about 24 now. So he's like, yeah, great, let's just keep going. And I'm like, oh, you've got more to learn.
Honestly, like the biggest lesson of all of that, and a really big part of maturing, is learning to not begrudge people their successes, and realizing, that like, okay, well, they got big for a reason, and it's not a zero-sum game, and and sometimes it is a little bit of luck and being in the right place at the right time, but their popularity doesn't necessarily need to detract from yours or your ability.
No, exactly. And it was very, very much a bad habit that I had at some point earlier on in my career, which was constantly looking at what other bands are doing, constantly looking at the opportunities that I wasn't getting, et cetera, et cetera. And it boils down to a very, very simple thing, which is that maybe you just weren't good enough. And that's totally fine. And, maybe you weren't at that particular point or that particular thing. And, I don't really see that my songwriting or my kind of production stuff has changed massively. I mean, I know I've got more experience and better at it, but I still start a tune every way that I ever have, which is sitting down, putting some things together and going from there. So yeah, it's also a lot more conducive to a happy life by just not comparing yourself to anyone, and that's great. And I think that's one of the other big reasons why Deary's done so well, is because, every single fucking person will say, "Oh, you guys sound like the Cocteau Twins," and it's like, yeah, fine, like all good, it's not a bad thing for us. And the fact that you're listening to our music is great. So,
The other thing you really need to put in perspective in all of this is like, you haven't put out your first LP yet.
Yeah. That's what everyone fucking says, man. And it has taken.
I know it's been a while, and I know it took a long time to get here, but like, it's like now things are gonna really get interesting, right?
I mean, I know what you mean. It's always interesting, but and I'm very glad that we took the time that we did to put the record out, and make the record as good as we could. But it's also given us a little bit of chomping at the bit, and album number 2 is already underway.